Okay, so now that we've spoken about, why walking is important, why the number of steps you get is important as well, let's take a look at the actual accuracy of some of the devices that people tend to use to measure their steps. So, smartwatches, of course, are booming in popularity. This Apple event is coming up, which will showcase the new Apple Watch as well, so that's really exciting. Um, and a lot of these companies, they tend to have internal validation for their step counts. So when you purchase a watch, as far as the accuracy of the step count goes, it's generally done, within the company, within their own algorithms. A lot of individuals now, or a lot of companies, sorry, now use a lot of artificial intelligence or AI metrics in order to try and derive certain parameters that give the most accurate step count. And from that kind of combination, it becomes a little bit difficult to externally validate some of these algorithms because we don't have access to them. So, what people tend to do is actually run studies where they have a manual step counter. So, somebody, for example, who's recording an individual walking, um, and then they would put a watch on the wrist as well. And then, as the person walks, the watch would pick up the counts, the individual counting would also record a count, and then this can be compared thereafter. For example, Garmin is a very popular watch, and with the Garmin watches, there was a study where they took people aged 70 to 90 and they walked roughly 150 meters and they compared the step count of the Garmin watch to manual recording. And this was really cool because the watch was able to show excellent agreement between manual counting and its own assessment in older individuals. So, the watch was really, really accurate for step count in people aged 70 to 90 over 150-meter distance. Now, there was another study as well that took a look at this Garmin watch, but in Parkinson's disease. So, from that manner, in patients with Parkinson's who did a 6-minute walk and a manual count again for comparison, the Garmin watch actually overestimated the number of steps in the patients with Parkinson's disease, so this time it showed only a moderate agreement. And again, there's this whole idea that the watch should translate over time to your needs as well. So, if you're somebody who has Parkinson's and you're looking for a watch, it's important to understand the kind of research that's been done with the watch in your specific clinical condition beforehand. If we move from Garmin, there's also the Samsung watches or the Samsung Gear, of course, which is very popular, and the Apple Watch as well. And there was actually a really cool study that compared these two watches, and then it compared it to the phone application as well. So, of course, if you have your phone and you're walking around with your phone in your pocket, it tends to pick up your step count as well. So, this study actually used something called an active PAL, which is an accelerometer that you put on the thigh, and very accurate for step count. This accelerometer. So they compared the watches and the Apple and Samsung phone applications to this accelerometer. And interestingly, the Apple Watch actually was the best performer from all these. And the Samsung Watch was really good and reproducible as well. And this is again in healthy people, but this was over 24-hour period. So in comparison to the phone applications, the watches tended to be the most accurate when you compare to the active PAL accelerometer around the thigh. So again, the smartphone applications probably not the most reliable, for free living conditions outside of a laboratory setting, but the watches seem to be relatively accurate for healthy individuals. Moving from the Samsung and Apple watches, there's also a handful of other, types of watches we could take a look at. So there's activity graphs or actigraphs. And then Google, of course, has the Fitbit as well. And there's a lesser known watch, or almost like a bracelet style watch called the Jawbone. And there was a study in 2017 where they had participants complete 3 minutes on a treadmill for 5 different speeds. So these individuals were going at 5, 6.5, 8, 10, and 12 kilometers an hour. And they had an actigraph on the waist and the wrist. So they were actually looking at landmarks. So, if you put it on the waist, is it more or less accurate than if you have it on your wrist? Um, and then they also had a Fitbit on the waist and then different Fitbits on the wrist as well. And then same thing with the jawbone device too. And of course, by looking at different anatomical placements, you're able to assess what is the most accurate area for having some of these devices attached to. And is there really a difference? And, does this translate again to your lifestyle over time as well? So they had somebody again doing visual counts, and the step count error was actually highest for the wrist actigraphs and very minimal for the waist devices. So, if you were to put a Fitbit or an actigraph around your waist, this had the lowest error in comparison to wrist devices. When you compare everything to somebody who's manually counting the steps as well. Across all the different speeds, all the waist-worn devices were much stronger in accuracy in comparison to the wrist. And interestingly, from the wrist devices, the jawbone was actually the most accurate one at slower speeds, in comparison to the Fitbit and actigraphs. But as speeds increased, they all kind of leveled out and equalized in comparison to accuracy. So as far as the research goes, all of these devices seem to be very strong for assessing step count in healthy individuals. Waist-worn devices seem to be a little bit more accurate. And really, you have to consider, your clinical condition. You have to consider the type of research that's been done specific to your needs. And you have to really consider if this watch is going to translate over time to what you're trying to assess. If you're trying to have the most accurate step count, it might be good to take a look at a waist-worn device. And really, if you just want to see approximately where you're at, even something like having a phone in your pocket might be good enough. But again, it just depends on what you're looking for here. Okay, and so thanks everybody for tuning in today and listening to the lecture. If you would like to learn more about this topic, or if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, please put them in the comments below. And yeah, we will see you next time.